You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Seventh Sanctum with Kerry Ann, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
Good evening, it is 9 p.m. in the UK. You're listening to Seventh Sanctum on Parasearch UK Radio, and I am Kerry Ann. And this is going to be the first of many, I hope, the Seventh Sanctum special, where I will be joined with my most favourite of all Andys, Andy Mercer, and we will be looking at the more darker side of the paranormal, isn't that right?
Well, that is the plan, of course. Yes, definitely. You know, I have a long interest in the sort of the darker stuff, shall we say. I mean, I'm a writer on the occult as well as a researcher, and studied many strange topics. And you know, not every haunting is nice and fun and dandy. Some of them have got darker connotations. Well, some people say they've all got darker connotations, but I think we're going to sort of focus on the more interesting stuff, shall we say.
This is definitely something that I'm going to be looking forward to doing this show with you. I am fascinated with all that is paranormal, but I love a good story, and I love, you know, looking at what has happened for, you know, what has been the cause to the effect, so to speak, and kind of how did we get to where we are with what is happening or what is perceived to be happening in some of these locations. So this week's show has been inspired by the fact that as a Parasearch UK Radio team, we're going out venturing, aren't we?
We are indeed. We're going to discover the delights of the south coast of England, a particular place which I have spent many years looking into, investigating both on my own and with other groups as well, on the south coast, called Clapham Wood, which has a very sinister reputation.
I can't wait. Well, actually, do you know what? I a little bit can, because me and Woods, I've had a bit of a history with Woods. I don't always come off too well with badgers and creatures and crawlies and stuff like that.
Oh dear.
Oh, I know. I'm definitely trying to avoid the badger this time. If not, then I will be using one of my amazing co-presenters and presenters of Parasearch UK Radio to fight off whatever is coming at me. So I'm just warning you all now that
You're
you
going to throw it.
Yes, throw, pick up like a golf cue, just, you know, anything. Golf sticks, should I say, just anything. Yeah, I'm really bad, but I am super looking forward to being able to, because I've heard us speaking about the woods and stuff like that. In this particular woods that we're going to, it does have a really dark undertone, doesn't it?
It certainly has. I mean, it's almost the UK equivalent of the Blair Witch Woods, if you like. In fact, when I saw that film, although obviously it's completely fake, but it had a certain reminding of wandering around woods late at night and thinking about Clapham Wood particularly, where there are odd noises you do hear. Obviously, it's full of life, etc. But there are occasions when you're out there in the evening at night, you do hear the strangest noises sometimes. You think, well, what the hell was that? You know, I mean, I live quite close to the countryside here. I mean, I'm on the very edge of my hometown, and often like going off to the local country parks. There's a few around where we live, and that's quite nice and dandy. So I'm used to sort of seeing the countryside, but you do occasionally hear the odd noise, and you think, "Oh, what's that?" And I mean, we're talking back in the 80s when it was less well known about. I mean, today, unfortunately, it's been well publicised, and there's been a number of books have written about it. There's many articles on the internet, and you can find out quite a lot about Clapham Wood very easily. So people do tend to venture down there a lot to have a wander around. So there's a very good chance that when we make our little visit, we're going to run into somebody. There's almost certainly going to be other people down there, unfortunately. But, you know, it's a fairly large place. So hopefully we won't get too close to anybody doing anything.
No, or get lost. That's
Oh, yeah.
definitely don't want to get lost.
We won't do that.
But honestly, I mean, I've been looking at some of the the stories and the mysteries behind Clapham Woods. Sorry, it has some of the most amazing mysteries behind it, and some are still unsolved. And no one, even today, people are left stumped with what has actually taken place. But before we carry on with that, I would love to know your opinion, Andy, on one of the most haunted places within the UK and beyond tend to be woods. We've spoken about Epping Forest and Pluckley Woods, and even more closer to us where we are in Essex, we have Hockley Woods and the Screaming Boy Woods. What is it that makes what is about the woods that make them haunted?
Well, it is a good question. I mean, I can answer specific stuff about Clapham that I know about historically, but generally speaking, I don't know. Different woods have different connotations, shall we say, have different reasons why there might be strange things going on. I mean, we know about people who've sort of lived in the woods and maybe they've sort of left imprints behind. It's a place that brings us closer to nature. One of the things I often comment on when I sort of out and about is you look at the countryside around us, you think, oh, big farmland, all looks natural. Well, it's not. Farmland, the way it looks in modern times today, it only dates back to the early 1800s with what was called the Enclosure Act, or a series of government acts of enclosure where landowners and farmers were allowed to basically fence off areas and create big open fields where they would do their farming. But that's not natural. That is very much a man-made landscape. So, we go driving the countryside, and if you go places like the New Forest or sort of Dartmoor, those kind of places, they are completely still natural. Now, woods themselves, of course, most of them have shrunk considerably over the years when they've been developed and land's been made use of. But most woods that are around us are very, very old. They've been that way for centuries, if not 1,000+ years. So, the fact that they have a great age and they haven't been that changed other than by nature over the centuries, I think means it kind of retains a lot of its old sort of energy, if you like, its old feel. So you won't venture into a wood, you're not walking into something that's 50 years, 100 years, 200, 500 years old even. They're older than that. If it's a natural wood, it's been largely unchanged over the centuries, and that's true of most proper woods around us. I mean, we know things like Epping Forest is a fraction of the size it ever was, and of course Sherwood Forest is virtually non-existent compared to how it was originally, when it used to stretch for hundreds of miles. But the bits that do remain are still very, very old. So I think you're looking at the fact that the age of these areas, I think, definitely plays a part in it.
So when you go back to the energy of the trees and the forest themselves, it's something that I've looked at, because this question that I've asked you, I've actually asked myself, and it's something that I haven't actually asked myself before, or even really considered what possibly could make these outside locations, these woodland areas haunted. We can take the levels of energy, or the things that have happened within them woods, murders and battles and so forth. But what retains that? And there's two things that I come across that kind of put a little bit of maybe this is what's taking place. So the first one is the fact that the trees themselves are sentient beings, so they create their own energy as living beings as such, and retain that energy that is, in that environment, and hold some type of memory. With that as well, I kind of come across something called the water memory theory, in the fact that water has been proven to retain memory. And I've looked at a study at this actually. We was talking about this briefly before we done the show, and it's an experiment that was taking place in Germany, I think I'm going with this, and it's based on the work of other scientists. In particular, it was based on an article that was conducted by Dean Radin, who was a chief scientist in IONS and in the Department of Psychology. So they looked at how water can retain memory, and they kind of put that hypothesis in place kind of by doing an experiment. And what they actually was trying to prove was that distant intentions can affect the rating of ice crystals formed in the water. And they managed to test this, and they got approximately about 2,000 people in Austria and Germany focusing their intentions towards water samples that were placed inside electromagnetic field, like a shielded room, in California. And other samples were located as well outside the shielded room, so that they could act as a distant control. And ice droplets formed, and they kind of come to the conclusion that actually, you know, the water can actually be affected by intention. Now, when you think that trees absorb water from their roots, from the ground, and whatever else is mixed in with that blood, or, you know, so forth, that can be absorbed into the trees, into that living energy, and maybe that's something that's causing that haunting, so to speak. So, what do you think about that, Andy?
It's certainly a possibility. Excuse me. Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. That's one of the causes. You are talking about creatures that are effectively alive. They are. The scientific term is respirate. They do absorb and produce stuff out. They obviously absorb CO2 and produce oxygen. So that's respiration. That's one of those sort of things of life, if you like. There are arguments that there's a certain consciousness and awareness. I mean, that's for another time. But certainly they're living beings, and the idea that you're affecting the environment by what you might be doing or deliberately intending, I think has great weight to it. Certainly, I tend towards the idea of the electromagnetic fields around you are being affected, and they act like a recording device almost, that they can be effective. Now, because you've got trees absolutely everywhere, obviously in a wood and a forest, there is a lot of EM energy around that they are generating, because everything living at whatever level of living is generating EM fields, and some dead things do, of course, as well. But there is such a strong intensity of field that they may well be what's happening. That's why it's having an effect. Certainly, obviously, sort of pagan practices and witchcraft practices tend to take place quite often in woods as well, because they are, for one reason, of course, they're quite secluded, not to run into people, but also there are attuning with the nature around them. And of course, we're nature as well. We're all living human beings. We have our own energy fields as well. So that all kind of ties in together. But when it comes to Clapham specifically, there are a couple of real possibilities that might explain some of the things. This is next to the village of Clapham itself, of course, but there was a village of Clapham before, which kind of basically fell into disuse, and part of it is in the wood. There was also a very large impression in the ground, which is thought to be a plague pit, where plague sufferers who died were then basically thrown into. Obviously, the plague was incredibly virulent and was very dangerous, and they didn't bother to have proper funerals and burials because they really couldn't risk it. They would have to basically dispose of them some way off and bury them all in one particular spot. Now, again, not absolutely certain this is the case, but there is an area that has a significant bowl-like depression, which is very unusual. So it does suggest that may well be a real possibility that is one of the reasons, or if not the reason, why it's got such a strange feel to it.
Because it has been suggested that there is a really creepy and eerie feel about it. Now, you know, you can be influenced, like me as a person, when I go into a woods, I do very much feel like Bambi's mum. You know, I'm very aware of myself. I'm very aware of my surroundings, especially, for example, I found myself in Hockley Woods. We'd come to an opening, which was a circle of an opening, which was surrounded by trees, and we kind of ventured into the opening just by the side of some trees looking out, and I felt very uncomfortable and very aware of what was going on around me and the noises and super, you know, but yeah, so I think that in general woods have a creepy feel, but I have read that in particular this woods, because of the things that have gone on and the mysteries that are surrounding them and what's happened, not just with like people but with animals as well, it does have a really eerie sense to it. But going back to another thing that I've looked at in regards to what could possibly make these locations haunted is the stone tape theory. Do you think there's something that could apply in these situations? Because so much has happened in Clapham Woods. Do you think that's something that could also play a part?
Well, yes, because I do. Again, I'm not an advocate of stone tape theory itself. I do think it's EM field theory, feel like it's the actual energy that's around us that is effectively working like a recorder that's collecting and storing, if you like, the information of events around us. And then for whatever reason, my mind's interactive and it kind of replays. Again, it's not literally happening out there, but it is a kind of a generalized feeling of energy being around us, that is what we're experiencing. There is a kind of change as you walk into the field, if you like, that our presence energizes it, and these things start to occur. Now, they don't always happen. It's not sort of something you can set your watch by. They're just occasionally these things seem to happen. So stone tape theory is another version of what I would call the EM theory. It's hard saying M&F without saying it wrong. But yeah, that's my thinking. It still ties in with both the idea of the stone tapers, obviously the idea of the more solid objects literally like stone, but also crystalline quartz, that kind of thing that lies in the ground, that they are recording events and information. But I think it's the generalized energy around that you have as the source of these strangeness. But one of the things I think we should get on to is you talking more specifically about Clapham itself and what we actually know appears to have gone on down there.
Yes, I mean, I was going to go on to it next, actually, because, I mean, the information that is out there is immense, and there's lots of things happening from satanic rituals, and, oh God, and as well as UFO sightings. There's been reports of strange creatures as well, and as well as, the ghosts and the spirits that have been allegedly been sighted there. It literally has everything, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's a location that I came to become aware of back in the 1980s. It's definitely got a general reputation of being a bit strange. Now, there are recorded events over a number of years that have said to have occurred there. As I say, without us going into too much detail, we're all bogging us all down with immediate history. We are talking about animals apparently disappearing. There's been stories, rumours of a vicar missing in the wood and turned up dead. Also, police officers apparently supposed to have gone missing. Now, some of these things, they're hearsay stories and hard to substantiate. But the rumours about the wood had persisted for a number of years, and you can't really talk about Clapham Wood without mentioning the name Charles Walker, who has probably done more than anybody else to investigate the strange events and occurrences that have been known to occur in Clapham Wood. I've known Charles quite a number of years, actually. I was just giving brief bit of background. As I mentioned before, I used to be involved with Andy Collins and EarthQuest investigation group back in the 1980s and looking into stuff in the Essex area. But there were certainly reports of things further afield. Now, we're talking back in the days before the internet, that kind of thing, so information was always a bit sketchy unless you went down to actually talk to people. EarthQuest finished for whatever reason. It was Andy closed it down. He was concentrating on other writing, and I went off to university, etc. And I wanted to get back into it soon afterwards. Now, I'd read about Clapham Wood and wanted to know a bit more about it, and I was lucky to discover an investigation group that was based down in the area, down in Worthing, which is just down the road really from Clapham. They had been investigating Clapham along with Charles Walker, so I wanted to find out more about the group and what was going on, a chance to talk to Charles in person. So I got involved in them, and that's when I started to hear firsthand really Charles's experiences of trying to investigate what he believed was going on down there, and that was absolutely fascinating. Well, okay, let's start from what I can tell that I know. It has had a reputation for being haunted and UFO sightings seen over the wood, apparent disappearances, and he was trying to find out more information. This is a shortened version of the story because he could do the whole interview, but this is a short version of the events. Essentially, he put an advert in a local newspaper asking for anybody who had any information about the goings-on in Clapham Wood, and he received a phone call from someone who claimed to be involved in a satanic group that were based in Clapham that were making use of it. And Charles, being Charles, was very intrigued to know more about what this person had to say, and actually arranged to meet at a particular point in the wood, which back in the time when Charles was there was very dense and it was quite easy to sort of be hidden within. If you go there now, unfortunately, it was damaged quite badly in a great storm back in the late 1980s that ripped up lots of trees and did untold damage, and the area is actually quite an open area because of the damage that was done. But back when Charles went there, it was no more than 100 yards or so from the main road, but it was quite a thickly dense area. He arranged, which I think he admits himself as maybe a little bit risky, but he arranged to meet this unknown person at a particular time. He arrived at the designated spot, which is called the Crossroads. It's quite a well-known part, and was told by a voice from the trees and wood behind to not turn round. So obviously the other person was there but didn't want to be identified. He then proceeded to tell him a rather interesting story about a group that he referred to as the Friends of Hecate. Now, Hecate is an unusual pronunciation. It's usually Hecate. It's a pagan triple-headed goddess. I'm not going into the details there, but they'd given it a rather unusual way of pronouncing the name, but apparently they were making use of the wood on a regular basis. It was their site for their activity. I don't think he went into a lot of detail about exactly what they did, but they were using the site, and if he was had any sense, he'd keep well away and leave them alone, because they were going to continue using the site. He also said that there was another area that they would use if the weather was inclement and was poor. Now, they know there was a derelict mansion house, if you like, or farmhouse, really, not too far away from the wood. And Charles, being Charles, thought, well, maybe that's the place I should go and investigate. So the conversation was left there. Basically, I'm telling you this for your own good. Stop poking around, mind your own business. Now, some people have said, why on earth would someone bother even doing that? That sounds a bit strange, but it's fair enough. A warning to keep away, and that's understandable. Anyway. Take a bit further along, Charles went to investigate this ruined building to see if there was any evidence there. And what he came across was quite fascinating. Now, I'll be honest, I know Charles, but there is a little bit of a discrepancy about exactly where this painting was discovered. He says it was actually in the main buildings, or others have said it was actually in a derelict farm building on the site. But he did find a very unusual painting on the wall inside the either manor house or farm building, which seems to depict a demonic-like figure, almost like a childlike figure, with blue horns, big wide eyes, and surrounded by flames. Now, the suggestion is that this could well have been the meeting place that these guys would use when the weather was inclement or they decided to work inside. Again, no concrete evidence that was the case, but that certainly the painting was quite striking, and Charles took photographs. And I actually know another person, I won't name them, but who actually has seen or saw the picture, so I know it definitely existed, no doubt about it. And it was in situ. It was on the site of this farm/manor house. I say the description lies where these two people said they saw it, but both definitely saw the same picture. It was absolutely certainly there. So that gives you an idea. Now, Charles wanted to know more and wanted to investigate further, and has continued to this day almost to regularly visit the woods, as do other investigation groups, because Charles wrote about it, and a book was produced. Him and another chap called Toy Newton together wrote a book called The Demonic Connection, which outlined many of the activities of satanic groups, sometimes plural, that appear to be operating down in the south coast and in wider areas. Now, I think part of that was because they also recognise Andy Collins had a massive success with the Black Alchemist book, which covered a similar territory, the idea of using sort of sacred areas or areas in the woods or out in the countryside, or in the case of the Black Alchemist, often churchyards, to enact magical rituals to have an effect, which you can notice, if you go to sites that have been used, there is a feeling to them. There's no doubt about it. There's a change in the atmosphere. I've experienced it myself in my own investigations, where you are, without a shadow of a doubt, something's happened there. Whether you can see anything physical evidence of it is another matter, and occasionally you do find evidence. But certainly places have a change in the feel. So I do wonder if perhaps Demonic Connection came out as a kind of a riding on the wave of very successful writing of others. It's only my speculation, but whatever happened, it did get out there. It was quite a popular book and it sold quite a few copies. So the interest in Clapham as a haunted location with possible demonic and satanic connections has grown considerably. Now, coming from the other side of it, I don't know what exactly they're supposed to have done that's supposed to be so dark and satanic. They didn't particularly outline anything. Suggestions of sacrificing animals, etc., I think have come more from other people rather than from what Charles learnt from this individual. To this day, he has no idea who it was and has never found out. What he has discovered by talking to others is apparently this group do actually have members who have positions in society, that they often get caught out by doing sort of naughty things and get found out and then blackmailed to remain part of the group and provide sort of funds, etc. for the group. Again, how true all this is, we don't know, because as far as I know, no one's ever spoken to an actual member of the group, or not knowing that they were a member, put it that way. But it is definitely an interesting place, and the occult connection there is quite strong. So there have been UFO sightings as well. It's also got links to another location that's not very far away called Chanterbury Ring, which again appears to have been used by sort of occult black magic ritual. Now, when I say occult black magic, I'm not saying one is the same as the other. Occult is the broader term. Black magic is a term within that greater field. I want to make that clear before anyone shouts at me. But the suggestion that it's been used for activity of some kind is inescapable. It's definitely evidence there. To what extent, to what the nature of that activity was, that again is a matter of debate. People tend to see anything that looks like witchcraft based as being satanic, black and evil and dark and sinister, which we know is a load of rubbish. There are practitioners who might be walking a very dark, sinister path, and other practitioners who walk a much, shall we say, a lighter path. But on the surface, it can look like they're doing very similar things. It's often the intent behind what's being done that's different, and that's often the important point. But certainly the evidence that places like Clapham Wood and then Chanterbury Ring nearby have been used for ritualistic magical activity is undeniable. Now, I think obviously people have been drawn to the woods to make use of them because of its reputation that already had. So you're going to find stuff throughout that wood, and Giles regularly does find stuff throughout the whole wood where clearly ritual work has been done. But most serious practitioners will be very careful about what they leave behind. Anything left behind is done usually deliberately to mark the site, to let others know that they're making use of it, to protect it, to change its atmosphere on a more permanent basis. That's what they believe it does. They don't accidentally leave things behind. So if you find odd, strange bits left behind that don't seem to have any significance, it's usually because there's people even mucking about or just sloppy, basically. But there's no doubt about it, these places are being used. Now, I've spoken to Charles more recently, and he thinks that their activity has scaled down, this is Hecate themselves, significantly in the area because it's become so well known and so popular that they may well have moved on to other areas if they're still operating at all, because we're talking 30 years ago now, of course. But the fact of the matter is the woods have become an absolute magnet for strangeness and odd things going on. So that's why I say it's a bit like the old Blair Witch Woods. That's got its reputation, which was born of maybe real events. Obviously, it's a story, obviously, but its reputation grew in the idea that it was somehow dark and sinister. And I know the Black Hill forests, the real Black Hill forests in America, do regularly get visited by people looking for this kind of stuff now because of a film. Because people think they're now drawn to the area because of a film. Well, the film is obviously fictional. Clapham Woods is real, so there's even greater draw.
See, I'm looking at a lot of what you've been saying. So even I've come across Charles myself, and also come across his encounter. I found most quite fascinating about this is the crossroads. I've come across the crossroads being quite influenced into a story with the selling of the soul of the blues singer, again, yes, associated with the devil. So I found that most fascinating, and I'll tell you as well what I found quite interesting as well is the connection that they've made with the meetings to the mysteries that go on to the woods and the murders as such, because what I've come across and what I've read, whether it's true or not, is that these monthly meetings, they apparently have met monthly, and they would need a blood sacrifice, and they kind of accredit that to the murders or the disappearances happening as well. Mm-hmm. So that's something I'd like to explore a little bit more after the break, as well as the sightings of the UFOs over Clapham as well. But we're going to go to a quick break now, and I hope you join us afterwards.
Hi, this is Mark. You can join me and Kerry at 9 p.m. every Friday night on the Dark Night Show, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
Join Kerry Greenaway and Jay Lynch for the Parasearch UK Radio Show as they share their paranormal news, views and reviews from the UK and the USA, with the help of guests from both sides of the pond. Will they agree or agree to disagree? Find out every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, right here on Paramania Radio. You're listening to Seventh Sanctum with Kerry Ann, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
Good evening and welcome back. Thank you for joining us. This is Seventh Sanctum on a Thursday night on Parasearch UK Radio. And this isn't just any Seventh Sanctum show. This is our monthly segment that I share with Andy Mercer. And we talk about the darker side of the paranormal. And tonight our topic is been inspired by the fact that we're going on to I say jolly, I use that term loosely, to Clapham Woods as the paranormal team, the radio show that is. and we're talking about the mysteries and the dark undertone that Clapham Wood has, and maybe what we'll be looking into more when we go and have our own little investigation. So before we left, we spoke a little bit about the dark goings on with Clapham Wood, isn't it?
Absolutely. Charles Walker's investigations into what he was able to establish regarding an occult-based black magic group that may well be making use of the woods.
That's it. Well, I mean, I have come across this, and I come across Charles myself when I was looking into the show and what we're talking about this evening. And I come across a couple of stories that actually say that attributed or was the cause happened because of these satanic meetings in the group. Into the woods, sorry. But, I mean, I don't know. There's not much weight to them. I think this is a little bit hearsay. But I'm going to go through some of the stories, and there's 3 in particular. And I want to see what you think, Andy, if that's okay.
Of course.
Brilliant. So the first one that I come across was the story of the dogs that would go missing without a trace. And that there was a third one that suffered paralysis. There you go. Mm-hmm. So the son of Peter Love, while walking their family dog in the woods, watched as his dog ran into the thickest of the trees in the forest and disappeared, never to be seen again. The following week, Farmer John Conford's collie disappeared in the same place, and a third dog, a golden retriever owned by Mr. E.F. Rawlings, was found partially paralysed after running into the woods, the cause of which was never determined, which eventually led to it being euthanised. But they're saying this is only the beginning, so to speak. So they couldn't understand why these dogs were going missing, and then later on, in 1972, the body of an unidentified woman was found in Clapham Woods. The case was investigated by Police Constable Peter Goldsmith, among others, at his department. In June of the same year, Goldsmith himself disappeared, and Goldsmith, a Royal Marine Commando, had last been seen walking across the rolling downs near the town's 13th century church. Despite intensive investigations and a wide search of the entire area, his body wasn't found until 6 months later, on the 13th of December, amongst a thick patch of bramble, less than half a mile away from the location where the girl's body was found. And they never actually found a suspect for that either, or cause of death as well. And then later on, in July 1975, pensioner Leon Foster disappeared and was subsequently found 3 weeks later by a couple who was searching for a horse in the woods. And the horse itself had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. And on Halloween of 1978, the vicar of Clapton, the retired Reverend Harry Sneerling, went missing. His body was found 3 years later by a Canadian tourist. Again, no cause of death could be identified. In 1981, a homeless schizophrenic named Julian Matthews disappeared. When her body was found in the forest, police determined that she'd been attacked and strangled. And again, they never ever found a culprit either for any of the crimes that had gone on. And although you can't, I mean, whether, again, I haven't been able to find much more on it other than what I found here. You can't necessarily say it's paranormal, but the connection is made there because of the fact that they were making blood sacrifices and whatnot in the woods. But I don't know, what do you think?
Well, that's the thing. Animals do go missing in woods. Dogs, people take the dog for a walk and it's never seen again. The horse one is particularly interesting because that did seem to have been verified, and other people more than one person was involved in it, and no, the horse never did return. From what Charles has said before, I listened to an interview recently, and I interviewed him myself a couple of years back. There were tracks leading to where the horse was supposed to be, but nothing away from it. Almost as if it literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. The idea of people going missing in woods, again, it's not that uncommon. People who are determined to end their lives have to go into woods for those reasons. It does happen, But I think we tend to be focused on those that have happened in Clapham Wood because of Clapham Wood's reputation. It's almost like kind of rewriting the history, or at least becoming more focused on it, that they take on a greater significance because it happened in that particular wood, not another wood elsewhere. But then, as you're going to discover, parts of Clapham Wood, it's not very large, but it's quite dense. You could easily get lost in it and lose your way. Now, one of the ones you did mention about the police officer, now I was trying to find it myself, but there was an article someone wrote a couple of years back, and I do apologise, I can't find it now, that tried to track the police officer down, and was unable to, as in existing at all. Now, that was interesting. There was no independent record of this officer being in the police or going missing or dying or being discovered. It just seemed to come from almost hearsay stories without any real concrete evidence. Now, I could be wrong, but as I said, this guy did do a lot of research and was unable to track that down. And when that happens, you think, well, if one supposedly verified story about a location is proven to be absolutely untrue, or at least looks like it's untrue, can you be sure about any of the others? So, it's almost like we know animals have gone missing in the woods. We know this black magic group are supposed to be involved in animal sacrifices. Is it 2 and 2 plus 2 plus 2 making 4, or 2 plus 2 making a bunch of bananas? Are we just looking at coincidences here in terms of what's supposed to happen, or is there definitely a genuine link? Of course, it makes much more interesting reading to say there is a definite link between these two than to say, well, maybe it's dubious, maybe it's questionable. But there's no doubt about it. Animals have gone missing. Pets, taken for a walk, have gone missing or become ill, or as you mentioned, one there seemed to suffer a permanent paralysis. Again, we don't necessarily know. Maybe the animal ate something that caused the paralysis. Maybe the animals have just got caught up in thickets and unfortunately have passed away, trapped, unable to move, or have, as I said, there was a large indentation in the wood. Maybe the animals have fallen into that and have, injured themselves unconscious and have not recovered. I don't know. I'm totally speculating here. But in terms of the general feeling of the place and sightings of a strange nature, then there are quite a few. But then, as I say, a lot of people visit the woods, so there's more likelihood they're going to see things because they're going there because of the reason why they're going there, if you follow what I'm saying. If you're going to a haunted location looking for a ghost and you see a ghost, well, you're going to a haunted location looking for a ghost, so you're seeing a ghost. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that there is definitely a strange atmosphere. There are sightings, and as you were alluding to earlier on, one of the things that got Charles first interested in it wasn't the Hecate activity as such. He was interested in UFOs. He was a UFO researcher back in the 70s and used to carry out what were called night watches or sky watches, where you basically spend the night outside looking for strange anomalous objects in the sky. And the number that had been sighted over both Clapham Wood and Canterbury Ring that I mentioned earlier were disproportionately large, suggesting there was something that was drawing these things to those particular areas. Now, as I said, I'm not a believer in nuts and bolts UFOs. I think these things are something else. But the very fact that they're these energies, entities, whatever you want to refer to them as, are being drawn to those areas was very, very interesting. And I'm sure Charles won't mind me relating a little story of his own experiences, because I've talked to him a number of times about this, where one of a group of, I think there were 4 of them in total, certainly 3 of them, Charles included, were on the Canterbury Ring for the evening, and then were walking basically towards the summit when one of the guys suddenly appeared to levitate, literally lifted off the ground for a few moments, for several seconds in fact. And Charles actually has an audio recording of the man's voice sounding extremely distressed, being basically, leave me alone, let go, let go. And after a few moments, whatever it was had lifted him from the ground, dropped him back to the earth with a bit of a thump. And apparently the guy never went near the place ever again, or even went out UFO watching ever again, was absolutely terrified by his experience, not surprisingly. Now, as I say, Charles is there first-hand witness to this. What caused it? I have no idea. I wasn't there. But certainly hearing the man's voice in the recording, he was absolutely spooked. So some things definitely happen around there. What exactly is often hearsay and can't be substantiated, but there are strange things that happen in the area, definitely.
See, I mean, UFO. I'm not someone that's really looked into UFO sightings, or talking to Alison last week was really fascinating. I've been brought more into the world of what it is, more so these days than ever. But to me personally, hearing someone say that happened to them, I would be very dubious. But for you to actually hear the recording as well, I know it's not a visual, but how did you feel that when listening to that was something that was, it happened?
Well, I'll be honest with you, it's very much a lo-fi quality recording. You're talking about good old-fashioned cassette from sort of many years ago, and the sound quality itself isn't particularly brilliant. Having said that, to me, it sounds believable that the man was experiencing something. Now, what exactly he was experiencing, there's no way of knowing, of course, just from the audio itself. But to me, it sounded like the distress was genuine, but it could easily have been, someone's holding him, sort of grabbing him by the neck or something, and he was saying, leave, let go. Whether he was actually being levitated by that, we've only got Charles's word, but I don't think Charles is an outright faker of anything at all. So I don't know. I wasn't there. I wouldn't like to sort of stand up in a court of law saying yes, I believe that was exactly as said. But by the same token, I would say that based on what I heard in the recording, there was a man definitely in distress. It sounds windy. It sounds like he's outside. That much I would say for definite as well. But exactly what he's experiencing, I've no way of knowing. But it certainly is. It used to be online. Charles took it down because he got a bit of abuse about it, saying, "Why are you putting this rubbish, etc., etc." So he took it down. But it's around there somewhere. I'm sure I've got a copy of it. I'm able to locate it because I've changed computers several times since those days. So I probably have lost the recording, a copy of it. But it's certainly an interesting recording.
I mean, looking at some of the documented sightings, or alleged sightings over the years. In 1968, there was a man, an insomniac, I assume it's a man, that was glancing out of his kitchen window. It was about 2 a.m. and he saw an object hovering directly over the woods nearby. He called the police, who then arrived, and what he suspected was a UFO had disappeared. And in October 1972, a telephone engineer driving home along Findon Road saw a large saucer-shaped object in the sky before making a circle of the area and zooming off. Another report come from a couple walking near Long Furlong who thought they saw Venus low in the western sky until it started moving north very quickly. When the object was over Clapham Woods, a beam of light descended vertically from it and then rapidly withdrew before shooting away in the northeast. In 1967, the village of Rushington, a few miles away, two schoolboys, Toyn Newton and John Arnold, had a strange story spelled out to them on the Ouija board. The message claimed that the woods were used as a base for spacecraft and that one had landed to fetch supplies of sulphur and other chemicals. Unknown to them, a few months earlier, Paul Glover witnessed a multiple UFO sighting that seemed to show exactly what the messages said. Now, I know you have mentioned about the opening in the woods, and there's a few theories of what actually caused that. They're not actually sure, but nothing really grows there. And one was that they thought it was bombed in the war, and the other is that there's an old lime pit underneath it. So there is a lot of minerals and stuff in the woods as well, which kind of would, these young boys, would they necessarily know that? I don't know. But
wouldn't necessarily have thought so, but certainly the idea of the lime pit is the other explanation. I've forgotten until you said it there, but that's the other explanation of that indentation, which certainly exists. There's no two ways about it. It's there. What it's caused by, that is obviously open to debate. But I think interesting you mentioned Toy Newton. He was the main writer of the Demonic Connection book. Charles was a co-author with him. And he has since written another book, which I would say is a little bit fantastic, to say the least. It's a little bit crazy. And he has since then has disowned himself away from anything to do with the Demonic Connection or the Black Alchemist or any, the Clapham or anything to do with that world. He's moved well away from it. Why? I have no idea. That was obviously his own personal choice. But, it's an interesting thing that someone who's written so vociferously decided to back away. Now, you can go with dark, sinister, occult reasons why he was threatened or whatever, or he's just decided he didn't want to write about that era anymore. But, yeah, he was one of the other people that was with Charles that night, as far as I understand, with the levitation. So, but it's, it's definitely got something about it. So, as I say, some of the stories are hard to track down independent sources for. Others seem to be more valid, but again, they're talking about the animal disappearances as being the one that seems the easiest to trace for other witnesses or other people writing about it, at least.
And I think with the animal disappearances, depending on what kind of perception you're standing, what stance you're taking, whether that's to do with the occult, the satanic rituals, it's actually attributed as well to UFO sightings as well. So both have taken that as evidence for each other, so to speak. So again, what actually did cause this is no one actually saying for definite, or I suppose you can't, but they've both taken that as evidence as they're up to their own theories, depending on where they stand in the situation. But we've spoken about other people's experiences and what I've come across and what you've known from other people's personal experiences. But have you investigated these woods? What are your experiences here, if you have?
Well, I have been there more times than I care to remember. Certainly back in the sort of the early 90s, late 90s, I should say, when I got back involved with the investigation team and Charles Walker down there. A couple of times we used to camp out, not overnight, but we would base ourselves at the crossroads point where Charles had his original encounter. And I did have a series of rather strange photographs that I took that on one particular night, which I'm not a believer in orbs or anything along those lines, but this was a ball of light, which appeared not visually, but in the photographs. And in a series of pictures, it began to get stronger and brighter. It was, judging it as an object, if it was physically there, was about the size of a football, but it seemed to get significantly brighter as about in the row about 4 or 5 photographs. Didn't see it at the time, and there was nothing I was aware of as being in front of the camera at the time, but yet this ball of light is there. It's not your kind of fluffy, kind of off-white greyish orb. It's like a beam of light. It's quite a bright ball of light. So it's quite different to the conventional sort of orb photographs, which I don't believe in at all. Unfortunately, that was on an old computer many years ago and long since dead, and I've lost the pictures. But there was a series, I think it was about 5 of them, that showed this thing get progressively brighter in the 5 shots, and I didn't know it was happening, so I'd stopped taking the pictures. You're talking about within a minute, these photographs I took things. I was just photographing this particular pathway, because I've always been in the mindset, don't just take one photograph, take 3 or 4 at a time, because obviously if there's an anomaly in one and not the others, you don't have much there. But if you have anomaly in the same place over a series of pictures, it makes you wonder if there's something more concrete occurring, shall we say. I remember another occasion being, again, at that same particular spot, where I felt a gust of wind go by. Now, the weird thing was how warm it was. Now, this was late at night. It wasn't a particularly warm night at all. It was quite cold. But the closest I can describe it as being, if you imagine you're standing beside the road and you're wanting to cross over and a bus stops in front of you and you get the hot exhaust side panelling from the bus, the heat that comes out of that was very much like that. It's like a blast of hot air. It was like, people like a blast of cold air in a haunted location. This was very warm, but there was absolutely nothing that could have caused it. It was very strange. But without doubt, the strangest experience I had occurred when it was just myself and another friend. 2 seconds. 2 of us, just basically because we were bored, decided to drive down to Clapham. It's only a couple of hours' drive from where I live. And myself and my friend used to occasionally would venture down there just to sort of explore and just have a nose about. This was absolutely in the middle of the night, and the way the woods are laid out, to the south of it you have the Clapham village itself, which is a road obviously leads into it. To the northeast you have the main road, and I forget the name of it, it's an A road, and to the sort of the west you have lots of fields and countryside, and there's farmland. There's nowhere close by. Now, my friend and I were walking through a particular part of the wood which was well away from the road and and from the village, and was reasonably close to the farmland. But this is farmland. There's no tracks, there's no roadways, there's no path, there's nothing. It's just farmland with hedges and bushes surrounding, as I was saying earlier on. We were walking along. As I say, it was definitely past midnight, and 3 people came walking towards us. It was 2 men and a woman, and they were dressed as if they'd just come from a very posh ball. The woman was wearing a large ball gown, dark colour, sort of spread out around her. The men were in tuxedos, black tuxedos, white shirt, black bow ties, and they were walking through the wood. It was the most surreal thing I think I've ever seen. They sort of just looked at us as we walked past, and we sort of looked at them as they walked past, and we thought, where the hell have they come from? As I say, they were nowhere near the road. If they were walking from the A road to the village, they were going in the wrong direction. They were the wrong angle. The direction they'd come from was just miles of farmland. I think the next town was probably about 4 or 5 miles away. And yet they were fully dressed to the nines, walking through the middle of Clapham Wood at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was, as I say, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It really was strange. The other thing that really struck me as well was we had torches, that's how we could see them. They didn't. They were walking without light through the wood, dressed as if they'd just come from a very posh ball. So the men were in tuxedos, black tuxedos, white shirts and bow ties. Woman was in a long, it's like a dark grey or black maybe ball gown. The sort of thing, there's no neck part to, the kind of bodice kind of bit, and the skirt kind of spreads out beneath it. They were probably, I would estimate, maybe early 30s. I would guess. It's hard to, it was pretty dark. But it was the most strangest sight I've ever seen. It's like, what on earth? Myself and my friend just looked at each other and thought, okay, I think it's time to go. It's just really weird. I don't know what to make of it. So yeah, I've certainly had personal experiences of strangeness, of all different kinds of strangeness in the wood. But the photographs, I wish I'd still had them. Unfortunately, that very warm blast of air was very, very strange. But that's nothing compared to seeing these three people. It was just really strange.
So we're definitely in for a treat then when we go.
Well, I hope so.
And
the last time I actually went there, it was again probably getting on for a good 10 years ago. We ran into at least 3 other paranormal investigation teams and a bunch of people doing things that are references to do with dogging. I think you know what I'm talking about here. That was going on in the woods, so I won't get any more.
You've got the wrong Kerry.
Yeah. Yes, I think possibly. Certainly, yes.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I'm really intrigued now, and I was excited anyway to go along. But I'm really intrigued, especially. So, was this at the crossroads? You said you saw this, and we'll be going to the crossroads ourselves, won't we?
I'm hoping to. I mean, I'm having to sort of jog the old memory of exactly where it is. I've got a fairly good idea where the crossroads is. There's also a very large tree which was certainly for quite a period of time, was probably the number one site that was being used. And again, I've got a fairly good idea of where it is. I know the general kind of layout of the wood, and won't get us lost. I can get us back to the church and Clapham Village itself fairly easily. But it will be interesting certainly to see these old places again after, say, blimey, at least 10 years since I went last time.
Very exciting. I'm looking forward to it because obviously we'll be taking Kerry the Crystal Lady with us as well, seeing what we can get on the energy kind of level of things, as well as using the equipment. So I'm really excited with what we might be able to come across. Maybe even seeing the 3 people again. That would be crazy.
That would be indeed. I think this time I would actually stop and say, excuse me, where the hell have you come from?
Well, as you were telling the story, I'm thinking, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. I'd like to think that I would have gone, excuse me.
Well, I think it was just dumbfounded. You don't know what to say, really. It's like, we literally said, did we just see that? As you watched them walk off in the distance, I said, yeah, definitely.
See, I don't know what would have been more stranger. The fact that you would have seen them just walking along, no light, dressed up to the nines, or the fact that they've come across 3 men in the wood with torches looking for something. I don't know.
Well, let's not go down that path. That could take us in very dangerous places. But I mean, we are talking, this was, again, sort of 12, 13, 14 years ago, when it was already well-known by that point that it was supposed to have black magic and satanic activity. It's, I know old Charles used to go there virtually every weekend. Unfortunately, he has back problems these days and doesn't get out as much as he used to, and is not able to adventure as often as he did. But certainly he's still keeping a close eye with other people that sort of have worked with him, if you like, investigating. Now, I mean, I think one of the things you should say is they're not trying to cause trouble or difficulty. But, if you are coming across places that feel strange because the atmosphere has been affected by someone doing something there, the idea is to try and disrupt that. It's not necessarily to cause major problems, because obviously you don't necessarily know what's going on, but you get a feel for these kind of locations. And when you know how a place is supposed to feel, because you've been there many, many times, but it feels completely different, it feels completely wrong, then it's almost encompassing you to try and rebalance things. And I think that's kind of been the intent, that if you shine a light on these people, they tend to sort of scurry away to other places and stop causing problems. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to give you a brief little story about a similar experience about getting the feel of something being wrong somewhere and then discovering something. And myself and a friend of mine went up to, we can sort of visit local older locations, places like churches, for example. Incidentally, by the way, nothing's ever been done to Clapham Church, which is right on the edge of the woods. Now, if you think satanic black magic groups are hanging around, they do things in the graveyard. Never been any evidence of anything, which is intriguing in itself. But anyway, we sort of like to sort of just look at local old locations just to sort of get a feel for the landscape again. And churches are often interesting, as most of them have been there hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years. And there's one particular church, I won't say where, that used to be open 24/7. You could literally go in any time of the day or night. So nothing inside. It was very bare, for obvious reasons. But if you felt the need for sort of spiritual connection, if you like, as a Christian, you could go to this church at late at night. So it's not well known that it does. In fact, I've heard recently that even that has now stopped, that it is locked at night because they've had problems with it. People doing things that shouldn't be inside. But because of that, it was known that it was a location you could visit at night and shelter inside it if the weather was poor. It has been used in the past. Now, we've visited it before and we find objects of ritual magic, not negative stuff at all, positive stuff, nice, light, no problem. But there was one occasion we approached it and straight away we both had a feeling there was something not right about the churchyard. The whole area had a very unpleasant feeling about it. We didn't know what, but we just both looked at each other and said, something's not right here. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it normally does. We walked from the front of the church, where there was no sign of anything, round to the back. Now, there's a large tree in the graveyard, which I don't know what make of tree then, what kind of tree it was, but it's one of those, there's a large central sort of trunk, which then has no small branches growing from it. Then it goes up to about 6 foot and creates a veritable canopy that's quite a thick covering. So you can actually, even in bad weather, stand underneath it and you wouldn't get rained on. It's that quite thick. And again, we've seen things left at the base of the tree before, candles, other objects. We got round to this tree and, without being too graphic, was the head of a sheep, which had been almost ripped off. My father used to be a butcher. He's now long since retired. And I actually took photographs of it and I showed it to him. And apologies to those who are screaming, it's been cut off with a hacksaw. That's not a clean cut at all. That's been sawn off quite roughly. Now, we assume hopefully the animal had already been killed before this was done, but it was a sheep's head that was left underneath this tree with very ragged cut to the neck, suggesting it had been cut quite badly. And it was almost fresh, if you like. There was no sign of decay. It hadn't been there very long at all. So whatever had been done there, we have no idea, but clearly something had affected the atmosphere and that had involved the use of this poor sheep's head. We decided the best thing to do is not do anything with it. We did move it from where it was, so it was much further away. And there's usually areas of churchyards, you find areas where there's like bramble and bushes are put to be burnt. We placed it, push it with our feet basically over to that area, so hopefully it will be found there, not under the tree in the middle of the graveyard. But there was no doubt about it, when we arrived it didn't feel right, and then this head was there. So there you go.
That's very strange. And I working the way I do with energy, I agree. You do. We've done things before about how our body and it can react to, certain situations and the changes and stuff. So I can imagine it felt quite horrible, but not an experience that I would like to have, though.
Well, as I say, it was decidedly odd, and it was, in a way, it was kind of gratifying to then discover something in the far side of the church that, verified that we were feeling strange for a reason. It wasn't just us feeling a bit odd just for the sake of it. There was something actually. It could well be the source of that odd feeling that something had been done or carried out in this wood, in the churchyard.
Very strange. Well, with that all being said, we are going to be back next month, and we will be doing the part 2 to this show. So for those that would like to know how we got on as a group, what we found, what we didn't find, any experiences and whatnot, then please make sure you listen in to next month's show, because we'll be going through some of the things that we've experienced and kind of and what had happened to us. So here's to an eventful, a nice investigation, should I say. But we have some great shows coming up. We've got a special show coming up this evening. It's going to be the launch show for Jay Lynch and Kerry Greenaway, who will be doing their first Parasearch UK radio show on Paramania, which is the American station. So go and have a listen. I'm sure the links will be posted up for you guys as well, for you to go and listen. That's this evening. And we then have tomorrow night's show, which is the Great Paranormal Debate with myself and Paul Rook, as well as, which will be at 8 p.m, as well as the Kerry Greenaway and the Mark Manley show, which will be at 9 p.m, and they'll be talking all about the paranormal. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Andy, for joining us on our first proper official show that will be happening now. It's been great fun.
Yes.
Thank you. And I will be speaking and chatting with you guys tomorrow. So good night and thank you for listening.
You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.